friends, I'm Emily Lay, and you're listening to the Simplified podcast. If you're looking for a quiet place where you can filter out the noise and the hustle, this is it. Every week, I invite you to slow down and join me to explore practical ways to organize and automate the complicated parts of life so you can focus on what truly matters most. You guys, I'm so excited to welcome boundaries expert Nedra Tawwab onto the podcast today. If you enjoy watching interviews as much as hearing them, or if you're a super visual learner like me, then you've got to check out my interview with Nedra on YouTube. And by the way, all of our two-person episodes, and even a lot of my solo ones, are available on video on YouTube as well. They make it easy to share clips of your favorite tips with friends, so check out this episode and all of our other Simplified resources over at youtube.com/simplified by Emily Lay. A few weeks ago, we started talking about boundaries, and since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about them. It's like when your high school boyfriend got a Honda Civic and all of a sudden you couldn't stop seeing Honda Civics everywhere you went. Boundaries are just like that. Once you start thinking about them, you start to see them at play in your friendships, in your relationships with your partner, your kids, your parents, at work, basically everywhere. If you haven't listened to our first conversation about boundaries, I think you'll still find today's episode very useful, and I definitely think you'd enjoy our first conversation about boundaries. That was back in episode 49, and we called it Calm Your Anxiety with Better Boundaries. So if you listen to that episode, I bet you're starting to notice them in all kinds of places in your life. But knowing what to look for is half the battle. The other half is putting boundaries into place. And honestly, doing is harder than knowing, which is why I've asked for some help from a boundaries expert today. Just to repeat, when I say the word boundaries, here's what I mean. My favorite definition of the word boundaries was coined by my guest today, the super insightful therapist Nedra Tawwab, because here's what she says. Boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Expectations in relationships help you stay mentally and emotionally well. Learning when to say no and when to say yes is also an essential part of feeling comfortable when interacting with others. That's what we're going to lean into today. And that's what Nedra is so good at teaching us. You may already know Nedra from her super popular Instagram account, where she shows people how to create healthy boundaries by putting boundaries. Y'all, I don't know why I can't say that sentence. Please hold while I underline the word relationships. Okay. You may already know Nedra from her super popular Instagram account, where she shows people how to create healthy relationships by putting boundaries in place. And seriously, if you're not following her, you need to go do that right now. She shares the best advice. Nedra's a licensed therapist and also a New York Times bestselling author of Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And she's just released the super tactical Set Boundaries, Find Peace workbook. If you're looking for a practical guide on how to put healthy boundaries in your life, those books are it. And here's the thing you really need to know about Nedra. Her philosophy is that a lack of boundaries and assertiveness are the foundation of most relationship issues. And lucky for us, she's got a gift for helping people find healthier relationships with themselves and with others. I'm so glad this conversation with Nedra was recorded because she drops so many truth bombs that I just couldn't keep track of all in the moment. I need today's show notes just as much, and maybe even more than everybody else. And this is an episode you definitely want show notes for, so you can remember all the Nedra nuggets. You can find those over at emilylay.com/podcast. This is one of the most tactical conversations we've ever had on the show. I'm so grateful for Nedra's time and expertise today, so let's get to it. Here is my conversation with therapist and boundaries expert Nedra Tawwab. Hi, Nedra. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on the podcast. I just think that this conversation is so very important. And it's honestly something that as a working mom of 3 kids, I have struggled with a lot. I'm also an Enneagram too, so there's probably a lot to unpack there. A people pleaser. But
Yeah.
could you just introduce yourself a little bit for anybody who lives under a rock and hasn't already heard about you and your book, and just tell us where we can find you.
Yeah. So for the people under the rocks, I am a therapist who writes books and still sees clients while also creating content on Instagram and other social media platforms.
I love it. Well, there's something that you say that I love so much, and it's something that I have tucked in my back pocket over the years. You say that boundaries are not unspoken rules. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Many of us live thinking that people know things that they do not know. If I had a dime for the amount of times I've heard they should know or it's common sense, why
Mm.
wouldn't they? All of those sort of phrases we use to say this person should know better.
Mm.
Really, we know what we know, and it's not always the same thing that other people know. I've heard so many adults complain about getting into trouble as children for not knowing things that they were never taught.
Oh, wow.
We think about knowing as this universal thing, and we forget that many of the things that we know were told to us or we learned them somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And so, if we want people to respect boundaries, we have to tell them our boundaries and not assume that, oh, they should know they're 32, they
Yeah.
have kids, they have, all of these things we assume, throw it out the window and
Wow.
tell people what you want or need. It can be a simple sentence you can think is silly to say. Please say it anyway. I'm sure I get, people are probably giggling at me at times for some of the things that I say, like, hey, when you come over here, I won't have any lunch for you. Just
Yeah.
letting people know ahead of time, this is the expectation.
Right.
So you won't get here and say, oh my gosh, I would have thought you had lunch. I didn't say that. Why did you think that?
Right.
Yeah, but people will typically say, well, that's what I would do. Okay, well, we're two different people. So just
Yeah.
letting people know what the expectations are, what the boundaries are, what your needs are can really help us preserve relationships, experience less frustration and resentment in them.
Wow. It seems so, it almost seems so obvious, but at the same time, it's like, I don't do that. I mean, I can even
Yeah.
think of it with my kids. I have twins that are 7 and an almost 11-year-old. And I can think of conversations we've had where I'm like, guys, when you get home from school, hang your backpacks up. Don't just explode over my house and just, have everything go everywhere. But once we started saying to them, like, when you get home, here's the steps. This is what you do. This is what we expect. Um, it just brings clarity. I actually there was something you posted the other day that I bookmarked, and it is my marriage. Like, so I'm married to Brian Lay. He's wonderful. We've been married for 100 years, almost
Oh.
14. And he's fantastic, but we are so different
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. We're very similar in the most important ways, but different in a lot of ways. And you said on here, it's been said repeatedly, you can't change people, and yet the go-to is to change others as the only way of improving your circumstances. And I was like, I feel called out. Is she in my house? Because that there are times where I'm like, Brian, I love you to pieces, but if you could just be a little bit neater and like put your stuff away and maybe not leave your shoes all over the house, that would be great. And yet it's been 14 years and he still does all those things, you know? And you said on here, ask yourself, what do I need to change to have a different outcome? What do I need to accept and not tolerate? And what do I need to accept and live with? I feel like there's a lot of people listening who can relate to this in their marriages. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. As a person who works with couples, one of the biggest things is this person needs to change in order for us to have a happier marriage. One
Yeah.
of the top three reasons that, most folks get divorced is communication. Second is, finances. And third, probably in some mixed order there, but third would be infidelity.
Mm.
I would say all of those things are communication issues.
Hmm.
Often we are not having conversations, and some conversations mean, what does fidelity look like?
Yeah.
Is it appropriate for you to text your coworker who you might? How do we have these conversations? How do we have conversations around duties and tasks in the house? That's a big one for new
Yeah.
couples. How to distribute tasks, who's doing what. It is a really big thing that I think can be rectified by speaking. Often we hope that this other person will start being more tidy like us, or that this other person will start planning and budgeting like us, or that this person will start to think differently about relationship structure and, what things are appropriate or not. Often we are talking about the same things for many, many years in our marriages,
Mhm.
because the center of it is this person needs to change for me to be happy in this relationship. Now, there are times where we need to say, this is something that I cannot tolerate, and this is something that I need to develop patience around.
Mhm.
I read a book, Emotional Agility.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was spoke about in this book is, what do you do when you want to change another person and you want to stay in a relationship with them? You change yourself. You start to think differently about the problem. Your
Mhm.
husband leaving shoes all over the house, guess what you can do? Move them.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
most of us would say, oh, I shouldn't have to move his shoes. Well, guess what, girl? If you want to be married, you will be moving shoes.
That
Because
is a mic drop. Sounds so like, guess what? Yes, you are correct. And guess who moves the
you
shoes?
will move the shoes. Now you can
Yeah.
do it with a smile on your face, or you could do it and be angry. Perhaps there are other ways to make up for it in your relationship. Maybe you say, hey, I'm not doing dishes anymore after dinner. You seem to do those just fine. So maybe you could do the
Mhm.
dishes. I'll pick up all the shoes.
He's a good
I
laundry
don't know.
folder. Yeah.
There you go. You fold the laundry,
Right.
and I will make sure there are no shoes anywhere. How do we distribute according to what we can actually do and not focus on, oh, this person is so terrible at. If you
Yeah.
look at business leadership books, a lot of them talk about focusing on the strengths of people,
Yeah.
not the weaknesses. You don't say, oh my gosh, this person is terrible at punctuation. Oh my God, this person is terrible with clients. You put that person in the role that they excel at. They're
Yes.
wonderful at working independently. They're wonderful at making sure projects are completed. Don't have them do the things that they're terrible at, because you'll
Yeah.
constantly be complaining about it. And it is that same way in marriages. We want the person who always pays the bills late to pay the bills.
Yeah.
That's not the person who should pay the
No.
bills.
That's a round peg in a square hole, right?
Yeah, but we'll do it. We'll do it for 14 years. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, every month the bills are late. Please take over that task. Please.
That is so, and it doesn't mean, it doesn't show weakness on your part
At
or
all.
anything like that. Wow. I
At
hear my
all.
husband in the kitchen. You need to come in here.
Is he saying something?
No, I just heard him in the kitchen and I was like, "Wait, this could be good. Come in." No, it's so true. We laugh sometimes and say, I'm like, if you know what, Brian, if you were just like me, we would just get along so well and everything would be so great. And he's like, "No, when we kill each other."
I don't want anyone just like me.
I
I
don't
don't
need
know if
anyone
I
just
would
like
be
me either.
together. I wouldn't be with me.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, tell me, so I mentioned I'm an Enneagram too, so I'm very much a, what do we say? Like I like to take care of people. I like to, you know, everybody play nice and everyone get along and make sure everyone's comfortable. So sometimes setting boundaries or even being clear about my boundaries, it feels mean. It feels like
Mm.
aggressive. So what would you say to someone like me who is wants to be assertive and be clear but doesn't want to be aggressive?
I'm assuming you're being aggressive.
Yeah.
Often we assume to know how people will feel about us saying things. But I
Yeah.
want you to take a second and think about people telling you things and how you typically respond. People are giving you rules and regulations all day. If you drop your kids off at school, they tell you no cell phone. This is where your car. Now, are
Yeah.
you standing out there yelling at the folks for telling you those rules?
No.
Are you say,
You
okay,
just fall in
you
line.
you just fall in line. There you go. Most of the time when people are being assertive, we just fall in line. We don't see it as anything that's disrespectful or mean. We just see it as, oh, this person doesn't want you to sit on their desk. It's just,
Right. You just
it is
don't.
the way it is. It's not like, oh my gosh, you're terrible. You should be able to just do whatever you want to do. No, we usually say, oh, okay, I understand that. Now, there are times, depending on the relationship, it can be quite uncomfortable to set a boundary or to say something, but it is also a sign that you care about maintaining the relationship. Because I
Yeah.
will tell you, my ultimate boundary is not talking to you anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Ending the relationship. So if I am making a request of, can you come on time? Will you please do this for me? Hey, I don't like it when I am trying to stay in this relationship.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be in this. I'm trying to make it comfortable for me. I see that you're making it comfortable for you by doing what you want to do.
Right. Right.
Um, so I'm trying. And when I want to continue to try, but I may get to a point where I say, I've tried everything I can, and this is a relationship that just cannot handle any boundaries from my
Boundaries.
perspective in it.
This conversation also makes me think when others set boundaries with me that it isn't them being assertive, that it's them being clear, and that's respectable. And, you know, um, talk to me about kids. So, kids and boundaries are fun. Mine are 7, 2 of them are 7, one's almost 11, and they're in the middle of figuring out, especially my oldest, who they are, what they need, what their own boundaries are. And I think it's important to teach them how to set boundaries, how to be clear for so many different reasons. But how do kids tend to express their boundaries, and how do you think that I can best recognize them as a parent and help them navigate the idea of creating and maintaining boundaries in appropriate ways?
How do they express boundaries? By their desire of wanting or not wanting to do certain things.
Yeah.
Kids make requests all the time. Can I wear this shirt instead? I don't want to participate in this activity
Yeah.
anymore. I don't like talking to this person because they're boring or whatever.
Yeah.
They say all of those things, and most adults will say, "Oh my gosh, you're being mean. You must comply," because we feel that good children are compliant and easy. When in actuality, we are developing adults. And if we want to develop boundaried adults, we have to allow them to have some boundaries as children.
Mm.
I have worked with some super busy teenagers. I mean, way busier than I was as a teenager, and I work
Yeah.
part time. I mean, just for activities, tutor this, job here, um, all of these things. And my prescription has been wow, so we have a teenager who is really anxious, and we're wondering, what do they need?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like this kid needs rest, and they're demanding it because now they're saying, I'm too sleepy to do this. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go to this activity. They are saying what the boundaries are, and they're not being respected. You have to go to soccer. You have to go to this event. You have to. And they're saying what their boundaries are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not being respected because we assume that, oh my gosh, we have to have this kid that's super well rounded to, live in the world, which is true. We don't want kids at home doing nothing, but you
Right.
have to tell me how keeping them busy all the time and not creating space for rest, for Netflix watching,
Yeah.
for just chilling out, doing nothing, getting bored. Getting
Yeah.
bored is a wonderful
Oh,
thing.
amen. I could talk about that for hours. It's so
Yeah,
true.
getting bored. We don't have to occupy them all the time. Get bored. When I was a
Yeah.
kid, I got so bored, I think I created Pinterest. Uh,
I used to take my mom's perfume like boxes and trash and build like cities out of it. So
oh,
my kids come to me, they're bored. Go
yeah,
be
I used
bored.
to take magazines. This was my Pinterest. I would take like magazines and cut out the outfits I like and paste them
Okay.
in this little book. It was like a little fashion book.
I love that.
It just came. I had a whole board. Before Pinterest existed, I
You
had a paper
created
Pinterest.
Pinterest. I love that. But yeah, some of the
Get
things I remember
bored.
most of being a kid were when I was bored.
Oh my
But yet
gosh, I used to
today,
make up songs and melodies. I'm like, I don't know if
yeah,
this is how you sing it, but I'm gonna sing it this way. It just get
exactly.
bored.
Just get bored. So we're recording this on a Tuesday, and Mondays are my just crazy days. My kids they're in school all day. I got one that has basketball after school, another that has two dance classes, and then another one's going this direction. And I'm back and forth and trying to figure out what's for dinner. And every Monday, I'm like, why do we do this to ourselves? And yesterday, my youngest son looked at me and he was like, Mom, I'm tired. And I thought, well, no wonder. Look at what our Monday looks like. Of course you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, we just gotta
Mm-hmm.
listen
Mm-hmm.
and hear people, not just our
Mm-hmm.
kids, but people. So I've talked about this pretty openly on the podcast, but I've struggled with anxiety for like as long as I can remember. And I think
Mm-hmm.
part of it, like we've mentioned, has come from the fact that I love helping people. I love doing things at 110%. I love living off adrenaline and just being busy. And sometimes I find it really hard to gauge what my capacity is because I'm a pleaser and I like accomplishing stuff. So I say yes to all the things and then end up at a point where I just crash and burn because it's too much. And I know that we have a lot of listeners here who find themselves kind of repeating this same pattern. How how can we recognize the kinds of internal boundaries, if you will, that we need to maintain with ourselves? How do we know whether our discomfort is from stretching ourselves and trying something new versus just completely burning ourselves out? Burning the candle at both ends, as my dad likes to say.
I challenge people to think about this. I love helping people. I am a people pleaser as a badge of pride. I think about I love helping people. As you were talking, I'm like, I see myself as a helper.
Mm-hmm.
I love being seen as a helper, is what I hear.
Yeah, you would be accurate.
Yeah, I love being seen as a helper. And I wonder if you are doing something to appear a certain way as opposed to being this thing.
Mm, yeah.
Would it be so pressured if it was natural? I wonder about that because there is some, you know, even with therapists, there is some accolade that comes with being a helper. Like it
Yeah.
is like, oh my gosh, this person is amazing. This person, there
Yeah.
is some praise that comes with that that feels good. But when I think about our capacity, and when people say, oh my gosh, I'm at my capacity, I'm like, is this something you really enjoy? Let's say you enjoy it a little bit. 10% of you enjoys it. I don't think it's a full 100.
Yeah.
What other things are you? What other things can you be? I think very naturally women are thrown into the I am a helper. I love pleasing people. This cannot be true if most of us are experiencing burnout, issues with people
Yeah.
pleasing, anxiety. It's like, I don't know if we're really in love with this.
Yeah. No,
I'm not convinced. I'm
it's
not
so true.
convinced.
I think for me it's born out of perfectionism
Yeah.
and wanting to have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Because internally that makes me proud. Like I have accomplished all the things. Everything is in its neat little box and everything's done. And think a lot of that started when I became a mom, you know, and good mom equals XYZ. Good mom does
Mm,
this, this, this. And you just keep adding on top of that until your bucket of things you have to accomplish to be a good mom or be seen as a good mom is like
mm.
overflowing, you know? Oh, that's
I think
good.
a good cure for that is allowing yourself to be imperfect. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
knocking over a few books on your beautiful shelf and just letting them
I just broke
seriously
out in hives. What?
and just letting them, be disordered for about a week
Yeah.
and just living with that, just living with, oh my gosh, they see this thing, just going with it.
Yeah.
As a content creator, I am amazed at the amount of perfectionists. I know so many
Yeah.
people who could potentially create good content, but they are consumed with what other people would think, and the
Yeah.
period and the comma and the
The
and or the
aesthetic.
a or
Yeah.
the, oh my gosh, it's like, will you put it out there with a typo, please?
Please.
Like, some of my favorite books have typos.
Right.
I just look at the typo and say, oh, this person has a typo, and I keep reading it. I don't
Right.
take the book back.
Right.
We can read through typos. Sometimes you just have to put things out there without them being perfect. I've been in
Yeah.
situations, when you think of a new restaurant opening, that first week, it's going to be a little hectic.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to run out of rice. They're figuring out how much rice do we need to order? How much? Just just put yourself out there, because guess what? It's a part of being human. You will not make
Yeah.
everything well, everything will not go according to plan. And
Yeah.
we have to not only be able to deal with it when it happens, but also create space for it daily, to
Mm.
just allow things to be a little messy, to allow things to not be so organized and in its
Mm-hmm.
place. And also to allow people to not assume that everything is going well with us.
Yeah.
I am often amazed at the amount of people who present so well, but who are
Mm-hmm.
deeply suffering. But you couldn't tell it by the smell of their perfume, by
Mm-hmm.
the beat of their face.
Yeah.
Their makeup is just flawless and
Yeah.
beautiful outfit. And I have to say, girl, where you get them earrings? I mean,
Right.
they just look amazing. And then they will, cry for 50 minutes, or they will
Wow.
just fall to pieces when you say some things, because the outer exterior is only a manifestation of what we can control, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can't control the interior, but
Mm.
if I could organize this and have everything
Mm-hmm.
just so like no one will know the chaos inside,
That is a
there
fact.
can, yeah,
That is
yeah,
a
there can
fact.
there can still be chaos. I think about that often with hoarders,
Yeah.
that is simply, the chaos has become physical,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's already been mental probably for quite some time, and now it's at a point where everyone else can see it.
Man. That's yeah. We have a little bit of history of that and back in my family, which is funny because my mom and I like we're very organized and neat and tidy and there's some of that back in our family and I can see both sides of it, the people who want to have the perfect facade up and then those who it's become so much that it does just manifest itself like around you. Oh my goodness. I have this like rapid fire round that I'm gonna need like an hour after this to just sit and unpack and take notes because it's just so good. But I have this rapid fire round I want to do with you. Four quick scenarios that I just want to throw at you, and you just give me like your short but appropriate response for how you'd handle this. But before we do that, just so I don't forget, can you tell everybody where everyone can find your books and your resources and find you on the internet?
Yes, my book is available at Target and store and online, Amazon, Bookshop, most places that books are sold. Online, my website is nedratawwab.com. Please check it out. I have all sorts of cool quizzes and free worksheets. I also have a newsletter on Bulletin called Nedra Nuggets. And lastly, I am most present on social media, Instagram at Nedra Tawwab.
I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so here are these four scenarios. Um, Short but appropriate response for someone who's trying to step over your boundary. So, number one, a friend is coming out of state to spend a couple days at your home. She calls and says that her cousin has invited herself on the trip and she's coming to crash at your house too.
Appropriate response?
Yeah, what do I do? What
Okay.
do we do?
I was prepared to receive you, and I don't have the additional space for your cousin. Would you like a list of hotels in the area?
So respectful and kind, yet very clear. I love it. Okay, number two. Your sister calls and wants to talk about a problem with a coworker that you've rehashed with her several times and you're sick of talking about it.
Mhm.
What do you say?
Wonder if you talked to the human resource department and sought EAP services, if they would be better able to help you process this issue with your coworker, because it seems like it's impacting your working relationship.
That's good. Okay, number three. Your boss asks you to take on a time sensitive project when you already had that time mapped out for something else. How do you respectfully, clearly handle that one?
I am not able to take on this project right now due to the other things that I'm already working on.
I love it. It's for some reason in my head, I would need to like write it down, edit it, think about it, practice it. But really, it's just very clear and respectful, is what I'm picking up from all of these. Okay, last one. You're at a family reunion when your aunt goes to hug your son. He ducks behind you instead.
I don't know if you need to say anything.
That's good. Yeah.
I would love for adults to get comfortable with kids not wanting to touch. We often teach kids like sexual abuse is terrible. These are your private
Right.
parts. Nobody touches your private parts. But also, you don't have to hug people when you don't want to, because
Yep.
how do we take physical space a step further? How do we protect um, people in situations where they may feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
start when they're children and we tell them, you don't have to hug people you don't want to, because what happens when you become, maybe 18 and your boss is now asking you for a hug? Do
Right.
you do it to comply? Because
Right.
that's what we've taught them. We've taught them that you hug people when you don't want to. So,
Yeah.
how about teaching, okay, Auntie? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. As an adult who has been shunned by a child, not
Yeah.
wanting to hug me or speak to me, I
Yeah.
am fine. I'm not crying in my pillow at night
Right.
because my
Yep.
friend's son didn't want to say hello. It is fine. Kids read energy. And really, what they're saying is, I don't know you. I don't know
Mhm.
you well enough to want to hug you. Let them build a relationship with people. Now, you have a relationship with that aunt. They do
Yeah.
not. And even if they do, maybe she smells funny. I don't
Yeah.
know. But respect their boundary for physical space. Maybe they're just, not ready at this time. We have to allow kids to have that. Um, I certainly have family members say, and we live in a whole different state from our family. So when we go
Mhm.
visit family, they'll say, you don't want to hug me. And my kids are like, no. And I am
No.
super supportive of, okay, let's go play with the toy. They've said what they said.
And we're
Okay.
moving on. Yeah.
And we're moving on. They're a kid. Get over it. Why are you dying for a hug from them? It'll
Mhm.
be fine. Just
Yeah.
like, maybe if you play with them a little bit, I'm sure they'll warm up and they'll
Yeah.
want to hug you. But right now, you're a stranger to
Yeah.
them. And it would be weird for them to hug a stranger.
I this has become really important in our family and we've said to our kids, your body, your rules. And the
Mhm.
other day I was like, Tyler Lay, let's go. We're going to get your hair cut. And he looked at me. He said, my body, my rules. And I was like, at least you remember it. But I think it's so important because yeah, I mean, I even growing up and even with my own kids when they were tiny, I can remember being like, okay, get up, come hug your grandma, she's leaving. Um, until I really started thinking about putting that in your pocket and carrying it with you as you grow older and what kind of boundary
Yeah,
that.
say bye. Maybe not hug,
Yeah,
say
good wave.
goodbye. Yeah,
Yeah,
wave. Whatever way you feel comfortable saying goodbye. I do want you to have some manners and I
yeah,
do want you to say goodbye to people. But if you don't feel comfortable hugging, how do I
yeah,
honor that for you? Because you're a kid and it is very easy for an adult to force kids to do things that make them feel uncomfortable. That's that power
yeah.
dynamic that we talk about in relationships where people feel taken advantage of. So yeah, you don't have to hug this person if you don't want to.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here and talking through this with us. This has been so helpful, and I feel like I need to just go sit with it all for a little while. Thank you so much, Nedra. Wow. I feel like I need a good hour or two to just sit and think through everything that Nedra said. I love what she had to say about marriage, about the shoes on the floor. I love what she had to say about kids and really hearing their boundaries and respecting them and teaching them how to set them. And I love what she said about ourselves, about people like me and probably many of you who identify as helpers and really kind of cling to that identity. I just thought today's conversation was so very insightful. Again, go and follow Nedra Tawwab over on Instagram for so many good nuggets of information. As we close out this episode, I'd like to say a blessing for you as we leave this time together and get back into our days. I hope you remember that setting boundaries isn't mean or wrong, because setting boundaries helps us cultivate healthy relationships. I hope you remember that you are worthy of having needs and having those needs met by others. And I hope you remember that even though communicating your needs can be uncomfortable, it's always worth it to honor yourself. As always, I like to leave a little tip to help you put what we've talked about today into practice. So here is your task for this week. One of the things Nedra is so good at is saying no kindly but firmly. And in the moment when you're faced with a situation where you'd like to honor your boundaries, but it feels a little uncomfortable to voice your needs to someone else, it can help to have a few phrases handy to give voice to what you need. Something like, "Thank you for the invitation, but my schedule isn't open right then," to decline an invitation. Or, "When you say this, I feel hurt," when someone hurts your feelings. And if you need more ideas on ways to respond with a kind but firm no, go follow her on Instagram at Nedra Tawwab. She's always posting different ways to voice what your boundaries are in different scenarios. Thank you for listening to the Simplified podcast. I hope today's episode gave you a few tools to start putting healthier boundaries in place today. You can find show notes for this episode at emilylay.com/podcast, where you can check out links and resources we talked about here, and you can shop the Simplified brand of planners and products. And don't forget, you can pre-order my new children's book called You're Always Enough, and More That I Hoped For right now wherever you buy books. Before you go, I have a quick favor to ask. If you love this show, would you go to your podcast provider and leave a review? I want more people reaching for a life that's a bit more slow and sweet and good. And leaving a review helps your podcast provider get this show to more people who'd enjoy it. If you've left a review, thank you. Please note I've read all of your words and take them to heart. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye.